And today, as I should say, fortunately or unfortunately, but I will be able to look at your comments and I'll be able to try to answer your comments. So all the guys that are beduded with me, I'll be able to answer your comments in Mitzvah Shem. And I see over there, Rabbi Sher is the Rosh Kollel, and you make sure that anybody has any question, they tell it to you, and you'll go and write me in the question. And I mean the other Rabbi Sher, so stop smiling, you. But upon him, the Be'er Halacha brings the Taz, and the Taz says that when a person makes a knot, so the definition of the knot is dependent on your desire. If you want to untie the knot, so then the knot will not be considered a la'olam tika knot. So you can have a knot, which is a normal knot for a person to tie. Let's say he ties a knot like this, and this is a knot that he connects something with this morning. When I realized that I was going to, the way it looks now is going to be bidud. I mean, it's not clear yet, but the way it looks like I'm going to be bidud. So I went outside and I tied a schacha, how do you say, like some type of an awning, in order to have a place that I could sit outside and learn the Halakha Torah. And I tied a knot. And I was thinking, look, this is mamish the example of the Taz. Here I am, I'm tying a proper knot. And that knot over there is something that, let's say I would have had this idea on Shabbos, to put the actual awning up on Shabbos. It's not a mechitza materis, but it is an oil. It is an oil. And therefore, it would be usher nonetheless on Shabbos, else the usher of oil. Okay, but let's say the guy put up the oil already, and now all he wanted me to do was to tie the actual knot. So to tie the knot, the Taz would tell you, okay, so you tie a regular knot like this, you tie a knot, and you'll have das, you'll have an zin to undo the knot on Motzei Shabbos. The Taz seems to hold that that's mutter. Kum to gain Rebbe, the Be'er Halacha on his yard side. And today, Rabbi said, you're going to see what's the Be'er Halacha. The Be'er Halacha, with no pacha, took on the ganze Welt. In every which way, whether it was in halacha, whether it was in ashkafa, the Mishnah Rabbi, he took on the whole entire world, Rabbi Say. He stood on one side of the world and didn't care, and took the ganze Welt. So the Be'er Halacha says that this Taz is a pella. First of all, we saw the other day that the Taz is a pella because at least it has to be an Issa D'Rabbanan. In fact, the Be'er Halacha, and at least has to be an Issa D'Rabbanan, because we know that there's Yereim that the Mishnah brings at the end of the Siman, that the Mishnah brings that when a person ties a knot, which the derech of him is to tie that knot for a la'olam tika time period, so then even in a situation where he doesn't plan on tying that knot la'olam, Mishnah brings that there's an Issa D'Rabbanan, that he might come to change his mind and keep it loylam. In other words, not the case that we're talking about, where it's the derech of everybody to tie it loylam. That's the case that Be'er Halacha is talking about. Be'er Halacha brings that the actual, the Paiskim, the Mogen Avram, they bring at the end of the Simon Yereim that even if you have a knot, which is like a 50-50 case, like Rabbi Rosenberg is pointing out, you know, that some people do it like this and some people do it like this. And in this situation now, I plan on not doing it la'olam. I plan on doing it only lizman. And halacha says the Yereim, that is going to be an Issa D'Rabbanan, because you might come to change your mind and go and do it la'olam. That's an Issa D'Rabbanan, that you might come to change your mind on a knot, which is a 50-50 type of knot. Says the Be'er Halacha, so kavachayim when you have a knot, which is the derech ha'olam to leave la'olam. If it's the derech of the olam to leave la'olam, so then versteht sich such a knot, Avada, there's going to be at least a D'Rabbanan. Even if you had the das to go and untie it within 24 hours, there's at least has to be an Issa D'Rabbanan for a person that in such a case might leave it around the oilam. So therefore the Be'er Halacha, before he begins, he says the first thing you have to know is that for sure what we're talking about is at least an Issa D'Rabbanan. And therefore that knot that I just told you about, that self-made schacha, that self-made awning that I made. So if I would tie this knot and have in zin, I'd have in das to take out this knot on Motzei Shabbos. So then, no matter what, says the Be'er Halacha, it's at least an Issa D'Rabbanan. Is it also an Issa D'Oraisa? So that's already the Be'er Halacha's next line. Then the Be'er Halacha says, I hold it's an Issa D'Oraisa. The Be'er Halacha says, misvara, such a knot that's tali in the way that a normal person makes this knot, and it's no reason that it has to become undone. I'll explain this in a moment. So then we look at the shame catcher, and the shame catcher is something that could last la'olam. Therefore, says the Be'er Halacha, such a knot is going to be asa d'oraisa to make, even if you have das to take it out within 24 hours. I'm getting used to giving the shiur like this again. Is it coming out clear, everybody say? Is it coming out clear? So far, that's everything we spoke about the other day. It's going to take me time to get used to it. Bez Hashem, hopefully after a while, I hope I don't ever have to get used to this, but unfortunately, we'll get used to it, Bez Hashem. Maybe, through the shir, we'll get used to it. Al Kapanim, what's a pshat in the Bir Halacha? So I saw in a sefer, so he says like this. He says, pshat in the Bir Halacha is me, and this is Adkan, now we start the shir. Now we're back. He says, pshat in the Bir Halacha is because of Batla Daitai. Pshat in the Bir Halacha is Batla Daitai. What's the pshat Batla Daitai? That's the pshat that the Bir Halacha is asking on the Taz. What are you saying, Taz? That a knot that he ties with the das to untie the knot is going to be considered a knot lizman. It's Batla Daitcha, because most people that tie that knot, they tie that knot la'olam. And therefore it's Batla Daita, and that's the reason why the Bir Halacha argues on the Taz. Now, Rabbi say, if that's a pshat in the Bir Halacha, I saw in the sefer, a wonderful sefer, he says, it should come out that we say Batla Daita. Batla Daita is a concept all over the place. So Batla Daita, we should say also Batla Daita L'Kula. The Bir Halacha is saying Batla Daita L'Chumra. What do I mean he's saying Batla Daita L'Chumra? He's saying that therefore a knot that your das is to untie within 24 hours should be mutter, or at least only on Isser Rabbanon. Because the das is not kafi your das. The das has to be kafi the oilam's das, right? Yeah, that we'll see in a minute, Rabbi Sher. Right, but Masha'en Kain, this sefer says, so it should come out the Mamasha a Murdik Gazach. It'll come out a Murdik Gazach. It'll come out that we're going to say also Batla Daita L'Kula. We know there's a concept of Batla Daita. How could you use Batla Daita L'Kula? So he says, watch this. Let's say you have a person, he ties his shoes on Shabbos. Now, let me explain. I don't want to get involved in the Balabatish. Rabbi Meisner already has his malach how he ties shoes, and he asked me specifically not to talk about him in public in the mahalach of how he ties the shoes. So from this point, I'm not specifically talking about Rabbi Meisner, even if it happens to work with the way that he does tie his shoes. But right, and others, the Chassidish Olam by me, I don't know if they anyways have laces bichlal. They have like the clogs and the cracks and all that, and etc. So I don't want to get involved and get personal over here. But Al Kapanim, this year he tells me like this. This is what the Sefer says. This year tells me he ties his shoes. Now, many people, or if not most people, and again, let's not get involved in the Balbachkai, but most people, when they tie their shoes, their das is that untie them on Motzei Shabbos. You should know, like with everything today, you know, the machinery, the cars, they're not being made the same way. No, Shleimi, you can't buy a car that's going to last for 20 years anymore, and you can't buy a washing machine. It's the same thing with the shoelaces. You used to be able to buy shoelaces and you'd be able to keep them tied, and they would be tied for a long time. Today, it doesn't work like that. Today, you have to untie the shoelaces on Motzei Shabbos, and that's what most of the Welt is doing. That's what most people are doing. They're untying them most of the time. That's what he writes. If you want to argue with the Balabatish, I don't have time for this. That's what he says. He says that they untie the shoes. Most people tie the shoes Friday, Shabbos morning. And then I guess they go to sleep in the afternoon for a few minutes. So they take off the shoes. And then they tie in their shoes again. And they wake up. And then they untie their shoes Motzei Shabbos before they go to sleep. That's what he says. So he says it should come out that therefore, what if you have a Jew? He keeps his shoes tied the whole time. You know, he's not into these things, right? He just, so what happens on Shabbos, the shoelace comes out. That's how it goes, Rabbi says. Sometimes that's how it goes. So what happens? Now his shoelace comes out. He unties his shoelace. And now on Shabbos, it came out. On Shabbos, he goes and ties it. His das is he's going to tie it for the next 2 years, because that's how he is, indefinitely. We saw indefinitely, might even be the oilam. Says this wonderful sefer, that the Bir Halacha, we're going to say the Bir Halacha L'Kula. Since the lumdus of the Bir Halacha is Batla Daita, your das is not what is kaveya when it comes to tying a knot. The das that's kaveya is the Welt. So if the Welt's das is what's kaveya, so that's the gewaldige chiddush here. If the Welt's das is what's kaveya, so then this shoelace doesn't matter that you're not going to open it for the next 2 years. The Welt would open on a Motzei Shabbos, and therefore it's going to be mutter. That's what this wonderful sefer, that's what he says. No, what do you think? That's such a chiddush. You hit his chiddush. Unbelievable. This is the biggest chiddush that I ever heard in my life, ever. It's the biggest chiddush. It's the biggest. I've never heard such a chiddush. It comes out, this guy is tying his shoelace for 2 years. What 2 years? What 2 years? Until he murders another alligator, and takes lanyard and makes a new shoe. He's gonna keep this shoe tied for the next 2 years. indefinitely. And this Sefer is saying it's mutter. Why? Because since most people, assuming his Matthias is right, let's assume his Matthias is right. Rabbi Singer, I don't always do that. There's rules, there's no games. So this wonderful Sefer, he says that this shoelace can be tied for the next two, because it is Taka Chashuv Sefer. But I don't, like in one place, the Chafetz Chaim, he doesn't want to say the name of a certain Sefer because he's afraid you're going to lose respect for the Sefer because he said something which he felt was a very big toyas. Over there, he was talking about the Shoyl Meshiv, about wearing a watch, a pocket watch. So he says, Echad from the Gdolim, because he doesn't want you to know who it is, because then you're going to see he made such a mistake and you're not going to believe anything in a Sefer anymore. So here, that's one of the reasons why I'm not saying which Sefer. But the Sefer is an unbelievable chiddush. It comes out that if you have your shoe, you're going to have your das. You hear this, Rabbi Markovitz. You have your das tied, that this shoe is tied for the next month, 2 months, 3 months. And that's what you plan on doing. But your das is bottle. And we look at the rest of it. Now I'm going with his balabatishkai and assuming that most people do untie the shoe on Motzei Shabbos. I don't want to get involved now with people saying, no, half the people do. Let's assume most people do and go with that balabatishkai. Oy bezai, it's an unbelievable chiddush. Rabbi say, allow me to read you the words of the base mayor. The base mayor is the makor of this Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah brings down over here. How do I know to say this chiddush? That if you have a knot that you tie and your das is to undo it, that it doesn't work, your das, and we look at the kesher. How do I know that chiddush? He brings it from the base mayor. He does not say a word about batla daitai. He doesn't say a word. Listen to the words of the base mayor. Ayin Taz. Base mayor quotes the Taz. He says, Ella, and he has a lot of, he argues on the Taz and explains like this. Ella vadai haborer. This is clear. Delav bidaito Italian milsiklal. It is not dependent on your das. Ella kol kesher she'ena osli liyos nitter oimeya. Any kesher which is not made to be opened. Now he gives you examples of why a kesher would not be made to be opened. Or because me'atzmai, any knot which is not made to be opened on its own, because sometimes a knot is just a weak knot. Or machmashein like kim api hechrech aloivesh. Or if you have a knot which has to be opened because I won't be able to get it off my jacket. You have a one side tying to the other side. So there's a hechreach to open that knot. When you look at that knot, it's a knot that must be opened because otherwise I won't be able to get out of my jacket, right? I won't be able to get off my unterhosen. So it's muchach from the knot itself that this knot is going to be opened, either because the knot can't last or because the knot is a knot that mitzad hechreach aloivish has to be opened. Oya oisa kesher kiyim bisman oirech, right? Oya oisa kesher. It's something that, in such a case, that's called kayama. Afilu mekaven latiroi boy bayoim b'liachrech. The Baal Meir just told us a great yesod. Listen to the words of the Beis Meir. What the Beis Meir just taught us was that the yesod of why he and the Biur Halacha are not agreeing with the Taz. It's not because of Batla Daitai. They're not saying the das of the person is batal. It has nothing to do with the das of the person being batal. They're saying that when you look at a knot, and like the knot I made this morning on my schacha, on my shade over there, that knot, when you look at this knot, there is nothing about this knot which is mechayiv us to open it. Dahainu, it could last. It's a tight knot, number one. Number two, it's not something that I need to open it because you see, I won't be able to get out of my door if there's going to be a knot there. It's on top, it's on a roof, it's not bothering anybody. It's clear that mitzad the knot could last. The knot could last, and there's nothing pushing us mitzad the shame of this kesher, saying that kesher is not a lo'olam dika kesher. So then when we look at this kesher, what do we see? It's a lo'olam dika kesher. So now you're going to come along with your das and say something which isn't true. This is not batla daitai. This is not that the Welt is saying lot like you. We're looking at the knot. And mitzad the knot is a knot which is a lasting knot. You with your das can't uproot that. A kesher shel kayama is a kesher that mitzad atzmusai should last. Either because it's not going to come undone, or because it's not something I have to open in order to walk through or to walk around. The only thing is that you're saying now that you're going to open it, says the Beis Meir, your das is not going to uproot from the shame HaKesher. I'm going to tell you another way that something could be a kesher la'olam. If when I say I'm not opening it la'olam, so avada that's a kesher shel kayama. Avada, if I come along and I say this knot is not going to be opened, like the case of the fellow who's tying his shoes, and he says, I'm tying my shoes, and I plan on tying them for the next 2 years. Of course, that's a kesher shel kayama, Rabbi Isai. And Rabbi Isai, you know why we don't say batla daitoi? Because everyone in the situation of all these poskim of the Taz would yes have das to untie it on Motzei Shabbos. For example, let's say here I am, and I have to tie my tzitzis, and I won't have tzitzis otherwise. So then every person in his situation would tie a knot. For how long would he tie the knot? Just till Motzei Shabbos, so that he would be able to have a pair of tzitzis. Or the case of the tefillin that were found on the road. Anybody that would find tefillin on the road would tie the knot and have das to open on Motzei Shabbos. Otherwise, he would have to leave the tefillin in a bizayin. Anybody in the base of Mikdash that is snapped the rope of the violin. So what would he do? He would tie it and have a das to untie it on Motzei Shabbos. Why? Because he would be able to then have his violin in the base of Mikdash. Are you going to say his das is batal? His das is glat? Everybody in his situation would do the exact same thing. So the yisoid of the Bir Halacha is not because of batal daitoi. This is so important, Rabbi Isai. It's not to do with batal daitoi. It has to do with the shame of the knot. The shame of this kesher is a kesher that's just a lasting kesher. You are not going to be able to come and uproot that. What can uproot the lasting kesher when it's not a lasting kesher? That's the only thing. So if it's a knot that has to be opened, or it's a knot that will be opened because on its own it'll be opened, it can't last, or it's going to be open because otherwise I won't be able to walk through the door, etc. Says the Beis Meir, it has to be it has to be something that when you look at this knot, it's muchach, it's going to be open. Then says the Beis Meir, that's when we say that won't help. If you have a knot that doesn't have to be open, your das is not going to make it to change the shame of the knot. But Majein Kain Rabbi Isai, if this yid comes along and says, I plan on keeping the knot closed for the next 2 years, avada, that's aser. Avada, that's aser. Is that crystal clear, Rabbi Isai? I have a greenhouse. Is that crystal clear? I'll send you on a boat back to Wood Lake. Is it clear or is it not clear? Right? It's clear? Clear. But Rabbi Isai, just so you should know, if the Bir Halacha would be sitting here right now, which he is, he's watching on the Zoom in Shemayim, Rabbi Isai. And he, right now, Rabbeinu Agadol, the Bir Halacha is saying, you think anyways that I would be Makel? Why is he saying that? Don't you agree with what you... Rabbi Isai, the Bir Halacha over here is arguing on a Taz, on a Graz, on a Prima Godim, on a everybody, Rabbi Isai. Minchas Chinuch. He's arguing on everybody, Rabbi Isai. The Bir Halacha was only saying his Chiddush to be Machmir. But don't forget, one must never forget, the Prima Godim over here says, why can't I just tie the tzitzis and have das to open it, Motzei Shabbos, Sarchim? Says the Bir Halacha, I know the answer. The answer is that because it's no good, we look at the knot, and the knot is supposed to be a lasting knot, so your das is not going to uproot that. But the Bir Halacha is arguing on the Prima Godim, he's arguing Rabbi Kiva Eger, he's arguing on the Minchas Chinuch, he's arguing on the Taz, he's arguing on the grass. So he's not going to say his Chiddush to be Makel, and then allow the Avada, the Taz for sure holds not like that. The Graz for sure holds not like that. So he's not going to say his Chiddush to be Makel. So therefore, it's Baru Pashit. If you're the type of yid that ties your shoes for 2 years, Rabbi Meisner, and then you go and have Das, and you have the Das to even tie it for 2 years, but the rest of the Velt doesn't. So then we're not going to look at you at the Velt, and we're going to say that if you tied the shoes for a long time, of course that's us. So that's number one. That's number one. So what type of knots do we consider as das? The only time that we're going to be considering his das, very important. The only time that we're going to consider, we're not going to consider his das. We only consider his das l'chumra. Versteht sich? If he says, I'm tying it for his man, then it's going to be tied for his man. That's the most aleph base of all of Ketcher Shel Kayama. If I say I'm tying this knot that everybody else would undo, and I plan on doing it la'olam, let's say a tichel. Let's say I have a lady and she ties a tichel and she makes a double knot. We'll talk about that in a moment. And everybody else undoes the double knot because she doesn't want to ruin, because most ladies don't want to ruin their tichels. Or let's say like Rabbi Sher, he has that fancy Nike mask over there. What is that? Adidas? What is that over there? What is that over there? Is that Adidas? Sorry. That's what matters. He's got an Adidas mask. So the Adidas mask, he ties in the back and makes a knot. He makes a knot. But the rest of the Velt, you know what they do? They make a knot and they just keep it there forever. But he undoes it every So we say it doesn't matter what you do. Avada, that's what the Bir Lach is coming to be Mechadish. We look at the Welt because there's nothing there being Mechayiv, this knot, to be undone. He'd be able to get it on and off. And there's no reason why. So even if you plan on undoing it, the Bir Lach would throw you off a cliff, even if you had das to do it till Motzei Shabbos. However, let's say it's the other way. Let's say you have a tichel. Your wife has a tichel, right? and what does she do? She ties the double knot. We'll see about this double knot in a moment. It's not so pashut. But she goes and she ties this double knot or a spitzel. Let's say she has a spitzel, lemashal, right? And she ties her spitzel, a double knot. Okay? Lemaisa. Most ladies, this is what I'm told. Most ladies, when it comes to a spitzel, so what they do is that they don't want to leave the knot in the spitzel. Why? Because then it ruins the spitzel. So therefore, most ladies, they're not, they're going to take it out. So let's say that mitzad, we'll consider that to be that mitzad, the knot itself, it's mechayiv to be undone. Let's say that that's considered enough to be mechayiv to be undone. Why? Because everyone looks at this and realizes it would ruin the spitzel and it would make it look like a schnitzel. So that's why everyone's masking that it's normal to undo it. But your wife, she doesn't mind. If I have to wear this thing anyways, who cares? And she goes and she ties it into a double knot and she makes it and it lasts forever and ever and ever. And that's her das, is to keep it forever and ever. So are we going to say, but l'daita? Of course not, because that knot is going to last. That's the most basic of all knots. Is that crystal clear, Rabbi Isai? Is that crystal clear? Rabbi Markowitz, is that crystal clear? Crystal clear. Because if not, then whoever it's not clear by, I'm throwing him out of the koil. Is anybody not clear? Shlomi and Chaim, are you clear? Okay. Rabbi Zalter, are you clear? Do you know what a spitzel is or no? Because I can explain that. I can get one. I get one if you need. Okay, let me get weiter. Okay, now we start the shir. But I that was so important to me, Rabbi say. It's so important to me. It's so important this. Ad kidei kach comes again the chikrei leiv. And the chikrei leiv, he says, how are we going to kill somebody when he ties a knot? How are we going to kill somebody if he goes and ties a knot on Shabbos? Says the chikrei leiv, according to the Taz, we'll never be able to murder anybody who tied a knot on Shabbos. Why? Because according to the Taz, here you have this guy, and you see him, and he's tying a knot. No? So you say, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? So he says, I had das to do it till Motzei Shabbos. And in Zin, my das was to do it till Motzei Shabbos. So every time we give him Asra, it's going to be Asra Safek, because maybe I had das to do it till Motzei Shabbos. How are we ever going to kill anyone? So the Chikrei Leiv says, it's Muchach because of this, like the Bir Alacha. He doesn't bring the Bir Alacha, obviously, he was before the Bir Alacha. But he says, it's Muchach like the Bir Alacha, because it can't be. Lo Shemanu K'Zachidish. Elamai, we don't look at your das, we look at the type of a knot. So if it's a type of knot, which is oimid to be a lasting knot, then your das can't uproot from that. He says, what if the guy tells us, yeah, I did it till not till Motzei Shabbos. That'll be the case. Maybe the case will be, I tell you how we can kill somebody. We can kill him by saying that we'll ask him, how long did you have intention to make this knot for? He said, me, I'm mamish a bad guy. I'm a mummer. I'm that off the derech guy, and that's it. And I had das to do it for years. I had das to tie it. So now we'll be able to kill him, says the Chikrei Leiv. So the Chikrei Leiv, no, we can't, because we won't believe him, because they ain't not the Mason Matzmei Russia. We won't even believe him. From user to everyone. Who's my user friend? He's right. He got it right. He's a user. From user. He's ain't not the Mason Matzmei Russia. Rabbi Spitz, how much I miss seeing you in person. All right, let me get invited, Rabbi Isai. So das is das. It's crystal clear now. And now we start the sugya. Let's start, Rabbi Isai. Now we start the shir. So first of all, let's go, Rabbi Isai, into Shitas HaRambam, into the Hilchos Shita of the Rambam. Today we're going to have a lot of fun. So first of all, we basically have gone now through the first Shita, which is the Shita of Rashi. Rashi Shita is that what's Keveya, a kesher, if it's for short term, let's say under 24 hours. So that's mutter. Everything is based on Zman, according to Rashi. Under 24 hours, mutter, maybe under 7 days. Mishabura said, b'makom tzarich, we're saimach on the shita of 7 days. Over 7 days, over 24 hours is now Drabanan Dikana. What's the La'olam Dikana? So that we saw is that there are different shitas, but the Mishabura, our Rabbi, on his yard side, he holds that it's until the lifetime of this item. So if that's 50, it means it's indefinite. There's no plan on opening it. That's called La'olam. Now we start the shita of the Rambam. Rabbi Singer, is she listening? She needs to know the shita of the Rambam. Yeah. So the Rambam says, it depends on two factors. Keshe shel kayama, that's one, and uman. If it's a keshe shel kayama and it's an uman's not, those are the two factors in order to make it deraisa. Keshe shel kayama, kipshuta, we'll see in a minute, means la'olam. It's la'olam dikana, and it's an uman's not, which we have to go today and try and figure out, first of all, what's kayama? And also, what is an uman's not? That's Bez Hashem. So first of all, this is the first thing Rabbi said. And we'll see, we're going to take on lots of chumras, like any double knot is considered an uman's knot. Let me just see if I can still smell. A minute. Yeah, I still smell. Okay, we're good. So Rabbi say, what is first of all the two criteria? If you have la'oila, if you have kayama and uman, that's an issa daraisa. If you have either or, you have kayama but not an uman, or uman but not kayama, that's a darabanan. If you have neither, so then that is mutter. If it's neither uman and it's not like kayama, so then that is mutter. Now, Abaisai, the first shaila is, and this is the shaila that the Mishabura talks about in Sivkat and Hay and Sivkat and Yud Gimel, when the Rambam requires, in order for it to be deraisa, it has to be kayama. It has to be kayama. What's kayama? Kayama means la'olam. In Rashi Shita, we explained what's called la'olam, what's called the zman, and what's called not even a zman. Now, the Rambam, what is the Rambam? The Rambam holds if you have an uman and kayama, that's going to be considered is a deraisa. If it's not kayama, so, but it's yes and no, it'll be derabanan. So now what's kayama? If the Rambam is going to tell me maybe the only thing in the world that's kayama is la'olam, so then we have a big kula in the Rambam. If the Rambam will tell you that the only time something is a problem of a knot, it has to be kayama and uman. So basically, what if I have a knot, which is like my drapes? This is the drapes that we keep on talking about. I take this is my drapes. I go like this, I make a knot, that's a one knot, and then I make a bow, right? Which is not easy to do when you're doing it on yourself, right? But hopefully we'll have Siyat Ishmael. Right? No, we didn't yet, but hopefully we will in a minute. Oh. So now you have a knot on a bow. So this, let's say I plan on doing this. Let's say the normal on crid bumpers is to do this for a month. And then you have to eventually wash the crid bumpers. That's how it goes. So now, according to the Rambam, this is definitely not an uman's knot because it comes out with the greatest of ease. It's not a uman's knot. That's all the place can say. It's not an uman's knot. And I'm not doing it lo'ilam. So we saw that according to Rashi, this is going to be aser. Because saif, you're doing it for a time. You're doing it for more than 7 days. You're doing it for 30 days or whatever. But according to the Rambam, we said if it's not an uman's knot, and it's not kayama. So now we have to define what's kayama. So the Mishnah Berurah says clearly, and this is really the Beis Yosef brings also, when the Rambam says kayama, he means la'olam. Anything less than la'olam is no longer deraisa. Rabbi said, did you hear what I just said? That means that according to the Hilchos Rambam, if you tie that knot and a bow, and it's normal that knot and bow is only tied for a month, let's say, so then it's not an uman's knot, and it's not kayama, because it's not la'olam, even though it's 30 days, 40 days, 500 days. But it's, according to the Rambam, it's going to be mutter. That's the Mishnah Berurah says, Deyazu pliga machaber gam be'ena kayama, v'hu ma'izedjed v'yadaita yiskayim ha'kesher zman, even if you want the knot to last, la mechaber mutter. La mechaber is the Rambam. Deyazu pater v'asa, but according to the Rashi sheet, it's pater v'asa. Ad Shebala, Rabbi Rosenberg, is what we're calling the oilam. But my point being that if there's any time, according to the Rambam, once there is a time, no, the nafkamina is like this. if you see your shviger doing it, you have to tackle her by the 50-yard line, right? Let's say you see the shviger and she's tying around the knot like this, like that, with a bow and whatever, so do you have to tackle her, right? So l'chayra, the answer is l'chayra, yeah. L'chayra, you do have to tackle her. Why? Because, you should use gloves, right? But l'chayra, you should tackle her because l'chayra, when she does it l'olam. She does l'olam. The only thing is that everybody knows that any good shviger is going to be washing it, at least let's say once a year. Now, you can ask your wife, who's probably in the background, all of you people that don't think I don't know, and you can ask her, does your mother wash the drapes once a year? Right? If the answer is yes, then according to the Rambam, it's mutter. No, Rabbi Schwalbe, does your shviger wash the drapes once a year? If she does, so then it's mutter according to the Rambam. So therefore, should she do it? No. Right? If she does it, do you have to tackle her? The answer is not for this. Because the Maisa, it's not, according to the Rambam, asr at all. If we would have learned that the Rambam is telling us kayama means any time that it lasts is already kayama, but that's not Pshat the Rambam. It says the Mishnah Berurah 5 times that if she's doing it with a hagbala, there's a zman. If she's doing it with any zman limitation, so it's mugbal, and that's not considered l'olam, and as long as it's not an it's not, it's mutter. Now again, no one should be listening to what I'm saying, because we do not paskin like this, meaning we're machmir. But I'm just telling you that this is the shita of the Rambam. Now, I must tell you, Rabbi Isai, there are those that argue on the Mishnah Berurah. The Balatanya, the Graz, argues on the Mishnah Berurah, and he holds that even the Rambam is going to be machmir if there is a zman. In other words, if there is a time period that you will bedafka be keeping it there for, so then even the Rambam is going to agree, even without an umin, that's going to be aser. So therefore, what about the Svardim? I'm being asked about the Svardim. Could they be makel? I don't know if the Svardim don't have our chumras here anyways. I got to look into that. But the Yalkut Yosef, he goes with the Malach of the Mishnah Berurah, but that's the Rambam. Right? So and even if she doesn't know the exact time, but she knows for sure that there is going to be a time limit, in other words, a month, 2 months, definitely not more than, something like that. So then according to the Rambam, technically that should be mutter. There are shitas within the Rambam that holds that's usher. For us, anyways, we're not allowed to do it because we're chayshit for the shita of Rashi, but you need not beat up your shviger for this. Now, very important, Rabbi Isai. Very important. Excuse me. Tough day at the office. Now, we're going to get now to the ikar meat and potatoes over here of the sugya Rabbi Isai, and that is what is called the kasher shel uman. Now, I'm makar toif to all the various Dovi Spires that sent me all different literature of all different Boy Scout knots and all different types of interesting knots. It was very, very informative. I really appreciate it. And it's helping me in my quarantine so far. Now, the Maisa comes again to Shiltei Gebarim. Rama brings them down, and the Mishnah Berurah brings it all. And they say, Kol, She'oisa, and really the Rav Payalim, the Ben Ish Chai brings it down. So this is also for the Svardim to listen to. What is a Kesher Uman? Again, this is how we're building it, everybody said. First we said Rashi Shita. Everything is Tali in Zman. Doesn't matter Uman or not. Now we're in the Rambam Shita. We discussed already what's called Kayama in the Rambam Shita. Now we want to know what is an Uman's Knot, which the Rambam is going to tell you is also to make even for 24 seconds. Here's going to be an example where the Rambam is going to have a Chumrah, and Rashi would have a kula. Rashi doesn't differentiate between an uman's knot. According to Rashi, if you have an uman's knot and you're making it for under 24 hours, so then that's going to be mutter. And it's obviously if it's a type of a knot which is made for under 24 hours. The Rambam's shita is if you have an uman's knot, even under 24 hours, is at least going to be an Issa D'Rabbanan. What is an uman's knot? So comes again the Shiltei Gebarim, and he says, Kol she'oise shnei ksharin zel gabe zen. You know already what it is, but it's always good in a shir to have props. Right? This is a this will be one knot. This is one knot, as you're seeing. This is the second knot. Anytime you do this, even though it's clear that I'm not going to leave this because that's a very not normal thing, is to leave this or whatever. So it's clear it's going to be on. Anytime you do this knot over here, that is a catcher, agabe catcher. That's an umen's knot, and that's an isser. Even though it's meant to be opened by yoim. Now, lemaisa, the Aruch HaShulchan, right away, in Sivkat and Yud, the Aruch HaShulchan says, Nira de Iker Kavanas Harama. He wants to say an unbelievable chiddush. He wants to say not like I just said. The Mishnah Berurah just said that even if it's meant to be opened that day, if you make a double knot, it's usher, it's considered a hadik, it's an umen's knot, it's a tight knot, which we'll see in a moment. And even if it's meant to be opened that day, it's an isser d'Rabbanan. The Aruch HaShulchan is not like that. The Aruch HaShulchan says that the Ramah, who brings down the Shiltei Giborim, that he's machmer on any double knot, but kavanas Ramah like yesh mekilim dat zayin yamim mutar lechatchila ukyesh nek sharon zel gabe zeh karav lasses a kesher. He says an unbelievable chiddush. He says the Shiltei Giborim, the Ramah, are only being machmir on the shita that holds you're allowed to make knots for 7 days. So if you're going to make the knot for more than a day, you shouldn't be making a kesher al gabe kesher. He says, why? If you plan on keeping it around for 7 days, under 7 days, 6 days, you're going to probably make a ma'isa omnis. And came to Rosh Echad. But let's say I make a double knot and I plan on opening that knot on the same day. I make this double knot and I plan on opening it the same day. Like this case over here, I'm obviously going to open it the same day. The Aruch HaShulchan says this is mutter if you plan on opening it the same day. But if it's the only time the Ramah was makel is when it was a case of where it was for the shita that holds in general were makel to do things for under 7 days. So that far he's not going to be makel, because generally when you're going to make a knot, a double knot, you're going to do it with some type of an umnus, like a gzeiraza. That's the shita of the Aruch HaShulchan. The Maisa, all the Paiskim don't go with this Aruch HaShulchan. All the Paiskim. I will tell you though, I found for Achenu B'nei Asfardim. The Or Letzion in the second volume, in Perikav Tesi Valve, he also goes with the Aruch HaShulchan, maybe because he puts a few kulas together over here. But this Rabbi Isai is the shita of the Aruch HaShulchan. I must tell you, Rabbi Isai, the Aruch HaShulchan is a big chiddush. The Shiltei Giborim is a big chiddush. To say that this knot is a woman's knot, is a professional knot, is a very big chiddush. It's a knot that everybody in the world knows how to do. What's the pshat in this Shiltei Giborim? Everybody in the world could do it. What makes this knot into an umnis? So the Chazon Ish says it can't be that this is the ikra halacha and it's just a chumrah. The chumrah, the Chazon Ish says lashon is a chumrah ba'alma. He says why? Shabbat the Gemara first talks about a lady who has a tichel and she ties the tichel in the back with a double knot. And when she ties this tichel in the back with a double knot, the Gemara says the words pshita. I'll read you the words. Paruch by Gemara, Pshita. The Gemara says that if she has such a tickle, the Gemara says it has to be that it's mutter. It has to be it's mutter, such a knot. Why? Because it's Pshita that she's going to open it. Mashma diyevsha sheyabamai. It's mashma, says the Chazon Ish. It's not shaykh in a tickle to have a ma'isa omen. Why not? Why can't you have a ma'isa omen in a tickle? You take the tickle, tie it with one knot, tie it with a double knot. So what is the Gemara saying? Pshita that it's mutter. Of course, it's a big chiddush. You can make a tichel, you can make a double knot. So the Chazon Ish says the Gemara is mefurish that to tie a double knot and a tichel is mutter. So then what's pshat in the Shiltei Giborim? Says the Chazon Ish, it's just a minig ba'alma and a chumrah ba'alma. Now, the Maisa, if you look at the Shiltei Giborim's lashon, he says, Kesher umin lo nisbar li heitav heyachu. It's not clear to me what exactly a kesher umin is. It's not clear to me. Miu nira from the lashon of the Alfasi that it's a kesher shekoisrin oisai hadek heitev. I think an umin's knot means something which is very tight. Now, but I'd like to explain something here. Yesh lachkor is every single tight knot an umin's knot. That's one way we could say it. Every tight knot is an umin's knot. The other way we could say it is every umin's knot is tight. It's two separate things. Every umin's knot is tight. Is that true? Every tight knot is an umin's knot. That might be true. Which way are we saying over here? So it's a very interesting thing here. the Bir Halacha over here brings it in Dibra Maskal Kosher, brings Sarchian on the Taz. What's the Sarchian on the Taz? Because the Taz says, Maisa Umin Nikra Shakesher Chazak Me'oid. What's a Maisa Umin? So the Bir Halacha, a Maisa Umin is that the Kesher is very, very tight. So the Bir Halacha says, this is Sarchian. Why is Sarchian? Because Dr. Bir Halacha, the Gemara in Perek Kal Ksharim, the Gemara in Daf Kafida Beis, the Gemara there says that the Gemara is discussing the sheet of Rav Meir that any knot that you can untie with one hand is not considered a knot. And I told you we argue on that, like the sheet that's Chachamim. So the Gemara over there says that, and it's L'charim refers in the Gemara. The Gemara over there talks about a knot and says this knot, which you can undo with one hand, is not tight. It's not mehudak. That's mefurish in the Gemara. The Gemara says mefurish, and yet we paskin that knot is asur. It's asur to make a knot, which is, even though you can take it out with one hand, and it's not tight, and it's mefurish in the Gemara, that we paskin, it's asur. So the Bir Halacha says, so you see, you can have a knot, which is asur, which is not tight. So you see that the qualification in order to be an uman's knot, you do not necessarily need to be tight. You don't need to be tight to be an uman, right? But do you have to be, but if you are tight, then for sure you're an uman's knot. You got what I'm saying, Rabbi say? Let me explain. The Bir Halacha argues on the Taz. The Bir Halacha argues on the Taz. And he says that he doesn't understand the Taz. And he goes on to say a pshat in the Taz. He says the pshat in the Taz, when the Taz says that if you have a tight knot, is considered aser, Zak the Bir Halacha, he doesn't mean what we think. He doesn't mean kesher chazak. He means a kesher that will not come undone. So he learns that the Taz is lavdafka, and when the Taz says a tight knot is a problem, he says the only time it's an uman's knot, the Taz says the words, anytime, the only time it's an uman's knot is if it's very, very tight. The Bir Halacha says it doesn't mean that the knot is very, very tight. It means that the knot will not come undone. A knot that won't come undone. Because says the Bir Halacha, it's impossible to say that the only way you can have an uman's knot is if you're tight. That's negative the Gemara. Yet the Bir Halacha in Sivkat and Yedalid brings down the Shiltei Gebarim. And the Shiltei Gebarim tells us mefurish, like we just said, kol kasher agabe kasher is a problem, right? Is a kasher shalumin, and the Bir Halacha tells the Mishabura tells us that dying he bring einanu bekiya mao kasher shalumin umistaber kol kasher shekoitrin no say hadeka teva v'shalumin. So what's going on here? The answer is simple. The answer is that the Mishabura is saying if you have a tight knot, then that for sure is an uman's knot. But you can have an uman's knot which is not tight. Is that crystal clear, by say? You don't have to be tight to be in uman. That's very important, by say. But if you are tight, then you are an uman's knot. Is that crystal clear? You'll see what the nafkamin is. Kanira Rabbi share that Kanira, a slip knot, you mean a slip knot on a knot, right? That we consider not to be an uman. Right? This with a bow, like on a shoe. Like this. Right? So this is not an uman's knot. Right? Now what's the pshat? Why is this not an uman's knot? It's very, very tight. Right? I guess the idea is it's very, very tight. I guess the idea is that anything, in Malasat, this is, I guess, what the pshat is. Anything that with the greatest of ease, you're going to just pull it like that and take away its strength, we don't consider it to be a strength. We consider it to be a knot. Not an uman's knot. But Rabbi like, this seems to be the side of the Mishabura. Again, Mishabura says, Einanu Bekiyim, what's a Kesher Shalomin? Umistaber the Kol Kesher Shkoichin is Adekatev. It's mistaber that any tight knot is an uman. But you can have uman's knots. For example, Duvi sent me a list of uman's knots over there that you saw were not so tight. Now, we'll see cases in a minute where this is nafkamina, but let's make this practical. How much are we makbid on this minig? How much lemaisa are we makbid on this minig? So I want you to know the Chidah, the Birkei Yosef is brought in the Shara Tshuva in Sivkot and Aleph, and he says, "Begliloi seinu," in our Gegenlach. How do you say Gegen in Sephardi? In unsere Städtlach, in Schildig. In unsere Städtlach. So he says, Pasha da minig. The minig is that we have belts, and on our belts we make a kesher gabe kesher, like this. The Chidah had the cool type, not like those geeky ones that you put into the belt like that. He had the cool ones that you take it, you tie a double knot, and he says that's the minig likshor shnei gsharim bechagurasai asher b'masnav. The belt that's around his pants, his hoizen. He says, and we consider it a hedyet. The lace dechash, no one is machmir. Elamiet demiet ubatla b'miutam. Oh, nobody's chayshish for this. Only a few people, and they're batl b'miut. So the Birkei Yosef, and this is brought down by the Shara Tshuva, so it's not just the Svardish Psak, right? They bring down that the minig is not to worry about making a double knot. Now, what's this? That means you can. So what do we do? I mean, is the Shara Tshuva arguing on the Ramah? The Ramah says you can't make a double knot. So now, if you would have asked me, and I saw this in the Kleisenberger Rebbe, in the Divrei Yatziv, in Kufnun Beis, in Ois Beis, this is what I would have thought, is that he's not coming to say that I'm arguing on the Ramah. He's avada agreeing with the Ramah. Shara Tshuva is not arguing on the Ramah. He's saying that when you make a knot on a belt, the belt inevitably is not going to be so tight, because no one's going to make it so tight that it's going to be difficult for him to undo. So therefore, this knot that you made is not so tight. It is a knot, right? But it's something that with the greatest of ease, you're going to go like that. And everyone knows that your belts are like that, either because you don't make it so tight or because it's a thicker rope. And therefore, that is not arguing on the Mishnah Berurah. That's not arguing on the Ramah. That's not arguing on the Shiltei Gebarim. So therefore, if you want to know, can you make a belt on Shabbos? So it's, I still remember over 80 years ago, walking with my Zayda in Borough Park. And, I remember on Shabbos him telling me that you have to tie the belt because there's a problem that there's no Erev. So you have to tie the belt before you go outside, right? So I tied the belt and I made the double knot. And he said, no, you can't tie a double knot on Shabbos, right? So Maisa, I'm not going to argue on my Zayda, but now he's in the Olam Emes and he knows the Emes now. The Emes is that the Maisa, Mitzad Hoitzah, it's not a problem either because it's bottled to the jacket. Because it's something that goes with the jacket. So anyways, you could leave it and you don't even have to tie it. And that we spoke about back then. And number two is that he's going to also, they're going to show him Shemayim. It doesn't matter. You can might say, how tight was this little bar mitzvah bacher tying the belt anyways? How tight was he? Because what? He wouldn't be able to undo it. So he's not going to do it so tight, and it was a thick belt. They're not going to show him that there was an error of everybody's side. Don't worry. But I'll go upon him. Maisa, that's what I would have said the answer is. And I saw that the Kaf HaChaim in Sivkot and Chav Gimel, he also goes with that. He says, Geliluseinu Pashat HaMinig. What does it mean in our Gelilus? It was Pashat HaMinig. Not that our Minig is to fight against the Shiltei Gebarim. And even in the Chazon Ish, you see this. The Chazon Ish said, that's our Minig. We don't understand why, but we don't tie a double knot. We consider to be every double knot to be a Kesher Shel Umin. He says, Nira Dahainu Sheina Mahodik, says the Kaf HaChaim. Now, there are other terutzim to this, Rabbi say. The Aruch HaShulchan in Sivkot and Yud. Who knows the answer of the Aruch HaShulchan in Sivkot and Yud? Why are you allowed to tie your belt? No, Rabbi Sher, tell them. Because it's for the same day. So according to the Aruch HaShulchan, it's less than a day anyways. That's number two. That's the second reason why, right? The Kleisenberg over there in Kufnan Beis, he has a different teretz, which is a big chiddush. He wants to say that the whole thing is a minig, and we're going to see that we have certain kulas on this minig of tying double knots. So he says, one of the kulas that we have is also b'makom tzarich, to not be able to tie a double knot for your tichel, and to not be able to tie the double knot on your jacket, that's a big tzarich. Okay, I don't understand that so much. On the tichel I hear, right? But on the, because you're going to walk down the street and everyone's going to know that you don't have, that you're bald if the tichel falls off. So that I understand is a great tzarich, right? But Mashain came on the belt, was brenzach. If he's not wearing anything under the jacket, we have bigger problems. Verstehst? So what's brenzach? Well, what's the big deal if the thing comes undone? Right? What's brenzach? I don't know. I'm very worried. Your wives are not going to let you listen tomorrow, so I have to get it all in today, Rabbi say. But Al Kapanim, that's what it says in the Kleisenberger Rebbe in the Divrei Yatziv. L'maisa Rabbi say you have to realize what this is. According to Rashi, it's under a day, so it's mutter anyways. According to the Rambam, it's under a day, but it's a suffix umen. No one's going to say it's a vade umen. So that means it's a suffix feka. It's a suffix feka. Yet we're machmir, it's our minig. So I say right, if you're doing it soft and it's something that you're not doing tight, for sure on such a thing, there is no minig. I must tell you that the Rav Pa'alim, he writes that you should know that the Chidah who brings this minig is arguing on the Ramah. That's how he says it. He says he's arguing on the Ramah, and that's, I guess, a new reason why the Sfardim could be Mekel, because I guess the Sfardim, they have a Kabbalah now from the Chidah, that they were Legamri Mekel on the whole entire Inyan of a double knot. So certainly, Vinishvi, it seems to be that on your belt, you can make a double knot. That's what it seems to be. If I would have been so brazen, I would have maybe said another Svara, to say it in public. But sometimes you have a knot which is so muchach that it has to be undone. It's so muchach that it has to be undone. And that's the knot around your belt. It's so muchach it has to be undone that maybe we don't even see it as a chibur. Maybe it's something that the Chazal never regoizer on, because this is only an Issa D'Rabbanan in the first place. Maybe the only time the Rambam would have been machmir is when you have a D'Rabbanan of an umen's knot, even if it's not lizman. Because you'll come to make it lizman. Let's say I show you an umen's man that there's no way in the world he could ever do it lizman, because then he would have to go to sleep in his coat, and then he would be that weird guy that sleeps in his coat. So then I was like, I wanted to say a new chiddush. I don't know. Maybe the only time the Rambam was goizer on an umen's knot when it's not lizman, if it's something that could technically be made lizman. But if you have something that can never be made lizman, like around your tichel or around your coat, maybe that'll be the nafkamid of my svara, because in your tichel, you could technically make it. You could technically make the tichel lizman. In other words, for more than a day, because you just take it off like that, right? Mashaking on the coat. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Come, let's try. Let's see what happens. Let's see if I can get this jacket off. Let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can get off the jacket. Let me make a double knot. And with this, I guess we'll end the share because I'm gonna be stuck probably. So let's see what we can do over here. Okay. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. Now we have a double knot. Let's see, is there any way to get, no. There's no way in the world. So maybe B'kai Govna, there's no way to do it. Right? If this was like my tichel or something like that, right? So then it wouldn't be doable, right? Yeah. Okay. The karate rabbi. Okay. So it's a sequel, fragment. Akapanim. So now, look, I could just take it right off, right? So besides this would be worse. So to make the tichel, that might be worse. To make the tichel with a double knot, you don't have my svara. Also, Rabbi say, tell me if I'm wrong. I think on the tichel, they do make a starka double knot, no? Maybe turn to the women folk in the back and ask them. I think they do. No, Shlomi, turn to the women folk. Where's Chaim? Where do we have the two of you together? So, Chaim, they can make the tichel very stark, no? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I think they even do maybe make the tichel very stark. I don't know. And I must tell you, the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, none other than the Kitzer and Siman Pei and Sif Mem he said, Svichen li zoyer b'mitpachat. When it comes to the tichel that they koyrich around the tzavar, he's talking about the one around their neck. That one I don't even understand, because that's around the neck. You certainly aren't going to make it too tight, because then you'll die. But he says, and also it's clear that you're going to have to do it in a way that you can take it off. So you have my svar. And also on Erev Shabbos, don't make snake sharim, because on Friday night you won't be able to untie it. That's a very big chiddush. If I say, what's the minig ha'olam? You know what you have to do for the minig ha'olam? For this, you have to ask Yerushalmis, because they wear tichels. Now it's in style to wear tichels, but it wasn't always. So I asked the Melech of all of Klal Yisrael, and he was also the Melech of all the Yerushalmi. I asked Rav Elyashiv. Rav Elyashiv said it's mutter. It's mutter to make a double knot in a tichel. I guess you have to say one of these svaras. We know the svaras already. Either like the Aruch HaShulchan, or it's a big tzarech. Maybe you have the svar of the Chazanish. That it's a chumrah. The whole thing's a chumrah, so we weren't machmir. Or maybe the tzura of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is something that its tzura does show that it's going to be taken off. Or I don't know. But that's what Rav Elyashiv said. L'maisa. The only thing is that I looked it up inside to see if anybody brings Rav Elyashiv. So I found like this in the Orchos Shabbos, he brings down Rav Elyashiv. He seems to have asked Rav Elyashiv also, and Rav Elyashiv said it's mutter. And Rav Elyashiv said it's not a problem. Why? It's not the type of knot that you tie tight. Don't know. So then Rav Elyashiv just told us that you cannot tie it tight. So to tie it loose, that's for sure l'chayr is mutter. To tie it tight, I don't know. I understood from Rav Elyashiv when I spoke to Rav Elyashiv at the time that you're even going to be allowed to tie it tight. So I guess we'll have to stop here. But what's his man for Rabbanan? That Rabbi Rosenberg will talk about tomorrow. Was only le chumrah. He wasn't talking le kula. Number one. That means if you have das to keep this shoe tied for a week, for a month, for whatever, no way. That for sure not. Number one. Number two is we saw today that according to and also we saw that Bialacha, even on his yard side, he wouldn't argue on the Prima God and the Tat, the Graz, and all the other great Achronim. Right? No one hears me? No one hear me? Abasher, your finger fell down. You should be going this way because you hear me now. Good boy. Let's make a quick sikkum. Number one is that according to the Bialacha only said his din le chumrah, not le kula. He wouldn't argue on all these great poskim. Number one. Number two is he never said as far as batladaito. This has nothing to do with batladaito. It's we look at the kesher. If it's a type of a kesher which is a lasting kesher, your das is not going to come and uproot from the fact that it's a lasting kesher. And therefore, for shteitzach, if you have das that you're going to keep this kesher for a month, for 2 months, of course that's asur. Number one. Then we saw according to the Eilik Rambam that the Rambam, when he says kayama, he means lo'ilam. Anything under the oilam is not called kayama. And that's a big kula, and therefore you need not beat up your shviger if she's tying a rope with a bow and with a knot and a bow, because she's doing, as long as she's doing it till Pesach or whatever, so then she still has the Rambam. Then we saw within the Shitas of Rambam what's called umen. We learned a new part of the niggin. You don't have to be, everyone got it right? You don't have to be, you guys got it? You don't have to be tight to be an umen, but if you are tight, you're an umen's not. That's for sure. Right? And therefore, the Mishnah Berurah is arguing on the Taz, and he says the Taz must mean that it's going to be tight. It means it's not going to be coming out. But Mashen Kain says the Bialacha, says the Mishnah Berurah, he agrees if you have a tight double knot, that's a problem. And the Shulti Gibayrim is mesupik, therefore he's worried about every double knot. So says the Chazanish, it's a chumrah. It's a chumrah that Klal Yisrael makabel not to tie a double knot. But it seems to be this chumrah we were not makabel on our coats. We saw many reasons why, either because it's not tight, that's a simple reason, or my svara, that even if you make it tight, but it's something that inherently is clearly going to be open, that it could never come be something that could be for a long period of time. Or we saw svaras, it's a big tzarech. Nafkamina is what about on a tichel? And Rav Elyashiv, I understood, was allowing us to take the tichel and tie it tight because it's a big tzarech, and Rashi's makel, and the Rambam, it's only a suffix if the Rambam is going to hold like that. So therefore, it could be that a lady could tie a tichel tight. L'maisa, the Kitzur says not to. On a coat, for sure, it's mutter. Unmute my holy brothers, and we shall unfortunately resume in this situation like this tomorrow.